Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 30th of January 2018, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, of course, Mike Robinson. Well, what do we say? Trust us, we're journalists.
This is a spectacular piece of good news here, because this is the Economist having a whinge about the fact that in the United States, well, of course, they're focusing on Trump, but in the United States and in the United Kingdom, mainstream journalists are only trusted about 50% of the time. Now, this doesn't seem to be too far away from the other poll that we highlighted a couple of weeks ago, which said that only that 83% of people distrusted the BBC. So, if on average 50% of people trust the mainstream media in the country, it must be the other media which is bringing that figure up. But this is research by Pew Research, which is a Washington-based think tank. Well, The Economist suggesting that this is demonstrating how successful Donald Trump has been at souring his fans' attitudes towards the press. I don't think so. I think the press has done this well and truly by themselves through their incessant lying and other misdeeds.
Fake news. Did that article actually mention the Daily Mail report on that BBC survey? 83% of people didn't believe the BBC.
No. This particular article had a much more US focus, but anyway, it's interesting, isn't it, that if we look on the graph there, Britain and the United States, apparently our mainstream media is trusted less than the mainstream media of Nigeria, for example. Well, which doesn't follow the sort of general stereotype. Okay.
And fascinating that this is blamed on Trump and not the Russians.
Indeed. Yes, good point. Okay, now look, over the last, goodness knows how long, we've been talking about how governance in the UK is changing, about how we're seeing this participatory democratic model with charities and non-governmental organizations getting more involved in setting policy and so on. And we're seeing this merger between government and private sector and third sector. Well, here we go. Here's the next stage. This is called What Works. This is all about apparently providing the government with high quality evidence which helps make or deliver better public services. And this is David Lidington on screen at the moment. He is Minister for the Cabinet Office. This is through the Cabinet Office. This is a new progress report from the What Works network, which is showing that the government's commitment to using high quality evidence in decision making is really having a fantastic effect and so on. Well, what is What Works? Well, it's a government funded network. It's made up currently of 10 independent What Works centres. We'll come on to those in a second. And it was created to improve the use and generation of robust evidence in policy areas such as health, education and policing. The progress report, which has been released today, marks the 5th anniversary of this network. And it highlights how public funds and resources have been allocated more effectively thanks to evidence provided by independent researchers in the government-backed What Works centres. So David Lidington thinks it's fantastic. He says the UK is now seen as a world leader in the application of evidence in policy and practice. And that is largely due to the increasing profile of What Works centres. Now, just so that people understand, what we're talking about here is a change in the way that this country is governed. It's no longer simply government which makes policy decisions, designs policy, and presents that policy to the public, and that local MPs represent the public's views of that policy back to government. That's no longer the case. Now we have private sector and third sector, that's the charity sector, getting involved in helping shape policy in the first place. And who is one of the key drivers, do you think? Well, it's none other than our old friend, Dr. David Halpern. Of course, he helped set up the Behavioural Insights Team. He helped draft the Mindspace document, which you can remind us is what that's about, Brian.
Well, the key point of this document is it says in it very clearly that the government, and I can't remember exactly when it was published, but it was at least 3 years ago, the government was boasting in their own document, Mindspace, that they could change people's views and values, and the individuals wouldn't realise this had happened, or they might realise that some things had changed in the way they looked at the world, but they wouldn't know how it had happened. And subsequently, this applied behavioural psychology was so successful, so powerful, that the techniques were sold to both the USA and Australia. So this is very dangerous brainwashing of people by the British government.
Well, Dr. Halpern, who is the National Advisor for What Works, said at the request of the Cabinet Secretary, and the Prime Minister, it's been a great honour to champion this agenda these last 5 years. So it is an agenda. He said he was answering the question, what works? He said what works is hard work, but it's often a game changer. We've been asking the question in medicine for 50 years and saved countless lives. Now we're asking it in schools, policing and economic growth policies, and its impact is proving equally large. Sorry, I'll just move on past that. So let's have a look at who the organisations are. Well, first of all, we've got NICE. This is what makes up the What Works network. We've got NICE, and of course they are the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. They're deciding what medicines we're entitled to, how much money gets spent on curing particular diseases and so on. NICE, it says, has gained a worldwide reputation for its pioneering use of clinical and cost-effectiveness methodologies. So the question is, Brian, are you value for money if they provide you with medicine, or are you just too expensive and allowed to die? That's really what NICE is about. The Sutton Trust is the next one on the list. Here we go, which is the Education Endowment Foundation, and this is in partnership with Impetus Trust, and the EEF aims to raise the attainment of children facing disadvantage by identifying and funding promising educational innovations that address the needs of disadvantaged children in primary and secondary schools in England. They evaluate these innovations to extend and secure the evidence on what works and can be made to work on a larger scale, and they encourage schools, government, charities and others to apply evidence and adapt innovations that are found to be effective. So what is this all about? Behavioural insights and the application of behaviour modification, perhaps?
Well, there's no perhaps, Mike. This is what they are boasting about. They're saying we can not only do this, but it works exceptionally well. And this is very dangerous. A gentleman said to me the other day that quite often we mention the power of neuro-linguistic programming, which of course NLP is one way that you can change and influence people's behaviour. But the particular man said to me, Brian, at the end of the day, what you're talking about is very, very dangerous and sophisticated brainwashing techniques. And public money is now being used by the British government in order to apply this to the general public in Britain. So this is immensely dangerous stuff.
So let's look at the next one, because the police are involved as well. So this is the College of Policing What Works Centre for Crime Reduction. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, it was only a week and a half or 2 weeks since we got the latest crime statistics showing that crime is going through the roof. So I'm not quite clear what the benefit of the What Works Centre for Crime Reduction has been, but the College of Policing became a What Works Centre in March 2013, and it works in partnership with a consortium of 8 universities. It's co-funded by the College of Policing and the Economic and Social Research Council, and it aims to map the evidence on crime reduction and encourage use of evidence in practice. So I'm not clear what's on their map at the moment, because there has been no crime reduction, or very, very little crime reduction in 2017, as we mentioned a couple of days ago. Next is the Early Intervention Foundation. This was founded in July 2013, and it's funded by the Department for Communities and Local Government, and the Department for Education, and the Department for Health, and the Department for Work and Pensions. It's an independent charity, though. Can you explain that?
Well,
no, right? No, okay. And it's there to access the evidence on which interventions work and their relative value for money, advise government, local councils and agencies, charities and investors on what works for whom and when, and advocate for early intervention to important decision makers. Next on the list is the What Works Centre for Local Economic Growth. Again, established in 2013, this is led by Professor Henry Overman at the London School of Economics. It's a consortium with the Centre for Cities and Arup. Now, Centre for Cities and Arup are two of the big common purpose linked movers and shakers. Arup, of course, the building
Engineers.
services companies and engineering company, exactly. And it's funded by the Department for Business Innovation for Skills, the Department for Communities and Local Government, and the Economic and Social Research Council. Then we have the Centre for Ageing Better. The Centre for Ageing Better received £50 million endowment from the big lottery fund, and it's been operational since late 2015, and it aims to identify initiatives and behavioural changes that can help people experience the opportunities and manage the challenges of ageing. This will help people feel that they're ageing well and help to prevent statutory services from becoming overwhelmed by encouraging people to die sooner. I'm being slightly flippant there, but that seems to be what is happening here. Let's move on. The next one is What Works Centre for Wellbeing. And of course, well-being is well defined. We know what well-being is, don't we?
Well, in my opinion, Mike, it's the exact opposite of anything well.
Yes. So the What Works Centre for Wellbeing launched in October 2014. It has 17 founding partners, including Public Health England, various government departments, the Office for National Statistics and the Local Government Association, and the Big Lottery Fund. And it is there to develop a strong and credible evidence base which will support these organisations to concentrate efforts on interventions that will have a bigger impact. So this is another organisation which is designed to intervene. It is staggering how far and how quickly this agenda to create these uber organisations.
This is big society,
Absolutely.
Mike. This is David Cameron's big society now coming to the surface. And of course, the bulk of mainstream media and newspapers have simply failed to report this. And I think in the first instance is because the average journalist has no idea this is happening. They've not done any research themselves. They don't join the dots, so they don't see this big picture happening. But there's been no formal debate in Westminster as to whether we should change our whole constitutional structure to allow charities and non-government organisations to help set policy, but that's absolutely what's happening. And of course, universities, which most people would hope would be places of learning and education and politically neutral, shall we say, it's clear that the government now simply owns and runs the universities. And you mentioned there that I think it was 8 universities were tied in with the College of Policing. So everything is being knitted together, and the objective is that this big society system, participatory democracy, will supersede what we traditionally regard as democracy, which is debate and votes in Parliament. So immensely dangerous.
But it doesn't end there, because here's the Charity Commission, and they've set up what's effectively a charity cartel, it seems. 25 charities, umbrella bodies, fundraising platforms and charity regulators met at the end of last week to discuss their role in responding to future domestic disasters. Apparently they highlighted Grenfell Tower as an example. But who's on the list? We begin the first charity. The list is in alphabetical order, but the first charity on the list is the British Red Cross. This is the same British Red Cross which, well, is it too strong to say that they stole a large quantity of the donations that were given to the Grenfell Tower victims?
Well, that was certainly the strong allegation by local people.
Absolutely. They are the first on the list. We've got the Charity Commission themselves. We've also got the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland involved in this, City Bridge Trust, the City of London, Clement James, Crisis, Fundraising Regulator, GoFundMe, Just Giving, London Community Foundation, London Emergencies Trust, London Funders, Mind, Muslim Aid, National Association for Voluntary Community Action, National Council for Voluntary Organisations, National Zakat Foundation, Office of the Scottish Charity Regulator, P3, Rugby Portobello Trust, Salvation Army, UK Community Foundations, Victim Support, Wales Council for Voluntary Action. They are all joining together, as I say, to discuss the role in responding to future domestic disasters such as terror attacks, natural disasters and other large-scale national crises in the UK. They also agreed to form a working group to develop the framework and operating principles behind any future disaster response by charities. So again, we're seeing the big society
built on the back of charities, which
Yes.
we're told are independent, but in fact they're overwhelmingly funded out of public money, government and public money. You mentioned ageing well in that, Mike, and I'd just like to say for our viewers and listeners today that yesterday I was astonished to be told by one of our excellent NHS researchers that they had seen an NHS document which said that basically if a person was over 80, then the cause of death could simply be entered as old age. So a box, you're over 80, you're in hospital for whatever, you die, somebody can simply fill in, well, you're over 80, death, old age, and that's it. And of course, the other thing that goes along with that, it's a very dark subject, is doctors being paid bonuses to pass people through for cremation as opposed to burial. And the significance of that, of course, is with cremation, you destroy the evidence. And on that subject, Mike, I just wanted to ask, if there were no weapons of mass destruction to justify the invasion of Iraq, there was no evidence of those particular weapons, was that part of the government's evidence-based policy?
Well, of course, that was before this system was this system was set up. So perhaps that's a response.
Okay, well, if you're of a weak disposition, please look away now. Here she is, our illustrious leader, Treason May, as we like to call her. And we've got some interesting reports from The Guardian. The Tories are ready to leap into the abyss to get rid of Theresa May. A leadership contest now could destroy the party, and yet a confidence vote looms. Basically, the text of this article said this call for calm, I didn't actually see the call for calm, but the call for calm comes after a week of government unravelling that has seen Theresa May go from weak but stable to weak and on her final warning. It's a good job she's under 80, Mike, otherwise possibly they'd fill in that NHS box. But what have we got here? She said that she'd like to say to all her colleagues in the Conservative family, left, right and centre, because we're a broad church, that the Conservative family needs to come together in a spirit of mutual respect. And I've labelled her there the High Priestess of the Conservative Church, because you get an uncanny sense that these are not normal people, whatever it is. Perhaps I'm being a little bit pessimistic. But not to worry, because the saviour is local Plymouth MP Johnny Mercer. Now he's waded in with some really astonishing intellectual analysis. He said it's time to prepare for Prime Minister Corbyn unless we get our, apologies, shit together. So we can see the quality of that young man. I've labelled him the lost Conservative Party representative because he was on record of saying he was very confused about what was happening in defence policy and of course didn't really understand it. So there we go, there's the standard of one of our key MPs, and this is the man helping to form defence policy.
You need to get a more recent image because the moustache just makes the man, Brian.
I did look for the moustache actually because it does give him a sort of ombre gringo sort of Western look, but I couldn't find one with sufficient resolution. We had another MP apparently who the Guardian article just described as a grumpy MP, and the grumpy MP says the government needs to start effing doing something.
Yeah.
So I've said that's probably an unknown cult member of the Conservative Church, but we're now starting to see into the Conservative Party. These are vile people, Mike. They are not concerned with what's happening in the country, people sleeping on the streets or the lack of jobs or what's happening in care homes of the NHS. These are the people presumably engaging a little bit of drinking in Westminster and maybe the odd snort in the toilets. Why is she under attack? Well, of course, she didn't perform well. So we're sticking with The Guardian here, and the headline is Theresa May is losing control. She must step up and find a successor. And of course, what's one of the names that's been put forward, Mike, for successor?
I'm sure it's Gavin.
It's Gavin Williamson, the Defence Secretary, who has said over several days that the Russians were going to attack UK, kill hundreds of thousands of people. So that sounds like a mature young politician to make leader of the Conservative Party.
It's interesting that the Express was carrying an article today about Gavin Williamson tearing down the EU flags from the Ministry of Defence. So he's clearly stepping forward as being the bastion of British sovereignty and anti-EU. So he's setting himself up, I think.
Okay, setting himself up hopefully for a big fall. Well, let's follow through on the journalist. I always like to look at who's reporting, and it's Anne McElvoy who's actually been doing a lot of talk about Theresa. So there we are, she's losing control, must step up and help find a successor. And of course, we know that the criticism of Theresa May is all piling in after her performance at the World Economic Forum at Davos. So on this lady's article, she had a quick look button, and if you press that button, this is what appeared. It was her explanation of what Davos is all about. She says it's a Swiss ski resort famous for hosting the annual 4-day conference for the World Economic Forum. For participants, it's a festival of networking, and if you get an invitation, you've made it, and there's an elaborate system of badges. Davos man is shorthand for the globe-trotting elite disconnected from their home countries after spending too much time in club-class lounge. And then who's there? 2,500 people, business leaders, politicians, Trump, diplomats, the odd celebrity. They fly in, but only 17% of them are women, so she's a bit upset about that. There is nothing here, Mike, of any substance about what is going on here at all. This is just drivel and nonsense. So we thought we'd just bring in a little bit more. This is one of her other articles, though, where she said it's showtime in the snow, but there is a serious purpose to Davos. So I think people should brace themselves as we have a look at what she had to say. She said it's a heady mix of mega names and the rest of us Davos proletarians who have to conquer logistics such as scarce accommodation and block roads behind the entourage of world leaders and various celebrities. So this is a serious meeting, Mike. And here she is making some other comments. The World Economic Forum is a kind of tantalizing feast in which the feeling, whichever party or meeting you're in, is that someone is doing something more important, pleasurable, or just with better wine.
Good.
Did you understand this so far?
So far.
So far. She wasn't eating the burger at Davos. I just thought it was an appropriate image to go with a tantalizing feast. She went on, she said, Stardust comes too, one of the crafty moves of the World Economic Forum. Only outsiders or first-timers mistake calling it Davos. Has been to attract big names from pop culture. This year, it's Elton John for his work on HIV prevention. So that's reassuring that we've got Elton John helping to form world policy on HIV matters. Stella McCartney, she's advising the world on, quote, ethical fashion, and Kate Blanchett on refugees. Last year, we shared the funicular late night with a cheery Matt Damon promoting clean water for developing countries. So this is mature journalistic analysis by a very high-profile journalist. And we'll just give you this bit. So whatever the varieties of the occasion, the World Economic Forum channels a desire to outdo others for bling and influence into a forum where people compete over their good works. I'm going to stop reading this because it is such utter trash.
Yeah.
But I hope people freeze it on screen and have a look. Now, why didn't this lady want to really say what the World Economic Forum and its meeting in Davos is about? Well, let's show you, because we need to come to this man, Mr. Schwab, who's the World Economic Forum founder and CEO. He's published a book which is about the fourth industrial revolution, and he's telling us really what he sees coming in the world. So we could have a look at this. He calls for leaders and citizens to together shape a future that works for all by putting people first, empowering them, and consistently reminding ourselves that all of these new technologies are first and foremost tools made by people for people.
Really?
Yeah. So
I thought they were going to take away everybody's jobs.
they were going to take away people's jobs, and it was going to be the AI systems which created new AI systems. but not according to him. Everything that all of these great and good and celebrities is doing is for our benefit. But you notice the leaders and citizens,
Yes.
we're back on the theme of the big society. He goes on, crowdsourcing ideas, insights and wisdom from the World Economic Forum's global network of top leaders from business, government, civil society and young leaders. This new book looks deeply at the future that's unfolding today. So here we are with a description. We're not going to have traditional democracies where stupid people vote. We're going to have these elected leaders. And this is the key bit. The fourth industrial revolution is, however, fundamentally different, characterized by a range of new technologies that are fusing the physical, digital and biological worlds, impacting all disciplines, economies and industries, and even challenging ideas about what it means to be human. Does that give you a warm feeling? It doesn't give me a warm feeling, but of course, if we put burger-eating journalists in charge of analysing what's going on here, we're going to get absolutely nothing out. And just to complete the picture, if you have a look at Mrs. Schwab, she set up a charity for her husband. I'm sure it's independent, Mike. And here it is, the Schwab Foundation, Meet the Social Entrepreneurs of the Year 2017. So they're creating these young leaders and entrepreneurs. This one I liked, the neuroscience on how to moat a teenager. I get a slightly creepy feeling, but don't worry because they're all good people. Let's bring these up on screen pretty quickly. These are the people they're mixing with. Some people might recognize Ernst & Young there, EY, accountancy firm, but helping to save the world. Pearson into media. What else have we got here? Let's just find it. We've got the Motsepe Foundation, founded by Patrice Motsepe, committed to improving lifestyle living conditions of the poor. The Frey Charitable Foundation, a Swiss family guided by an entrepreneurial mindset. It's helping underprivileged people. Ernst & Young, global leaders in assurance, tax, transaction, advisory services. So they're doing their best. Pearson, the world's leading education company, highly tied in with common purpose. Porticus, philanthropic programs of charitable entities established by the Brenin-Kemaya family entrepreneurs, and Korea's SK Group, Zurich Insurance. So I don't get a warm feeling. We've got the great and the good, the powerful, no sign of democracy amongst these people. When these people say Theresa May is finished, apparently her leadership campaign has just been given the chop.
Well, it's quite appropriate that Anne McElvoy was holding a hamburger there. We'll see why in a second. But last week we mentioned that on Friday, Penny Mordaunt, the head of the new Secretary of State for International Development, was going to be at the University of Edinburgh with Bill Gates. And she was talking about how science and innovation has the power to transform agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa, because the Department of International Development at the moment, a lot like those organizations you've just shown, is rebranding itself to present the idea that it is this philanthropic organization that's there to solve the problem of world hunger. It's not there pumping money into hotspots around the world to foment terrorism or extremism or conflict. It's there to solve world hunger. So world hunger, we can be sure, is going to be gone imminently. Anyway, she was giving this speech alongside Bill Gates on Friday, and she said the threats to our food supplies from droughts, floods and other climate shocks are increasing. Emerging food crop and infectious livestock diseases threaten human, animal and plant health globally. Migration and conflict magnify the challenges for our humanitarian system, and put this against the backdrop of rapidly rising world population. The urgency of the task is clear. Well, what task? Well, the task for feeding the world. So she said, today at Edinburgh University, we're delighted to announce the UK funding for the newly established Centre for Tropical Livestock Genetics and Health. So this is how we're going to solve the global food crisis through the Centre for Tropical Livestock genetics and health. Over the next 3 years, scientists working here at Edinburgh will be transforming the lives of dairy and poultry farmers in Africa. They will advance the science of cattle and poultry breeding to ensure that the livestock sector meets its potential as a source of wealth and prosperity for many developing countries. Now, this I found very confusing, Brian, because the climate change rhetoric that Penny Mordaunt and a whole bunch of others are promoting is that meat is bad because meat comes from animals and animals fart. I'm sorry for using that word on the UK column news, but that's the thing. The resulting methane output is bad for climate change, right? Which is why I'm surprised to hear that Penny Mordaunt is with Bill Gates to promote agri-tech focused on livestock and not on vegetable matter, right? So since the promotion of livestock farming doesn't fit with the climate change policy, I presume there's something else going on. So maybe they're hoping to genetically engineer animals that don't create lots of methane. But I think what's going on, Brian, is that what we're seeing here is the expansion. It has been hugely successful for Monsanto and others to patent genetically engineered and genetically modified crops. They're now looking to do the same with livestock. They want to force farmers to use their genetically modified livestock, which of course will be much more capable of withstanding droughts, much more capable of withstanding diseases, and so on. And I don't see this as being the solution to a world hunger problem. This is something pretty unpleasant being built here.
This is something really unpleasant. I'm going to take it a step further. I think it goes a step further. I think they're working towards growing flesh. There will be no animals. There will only be the flesh of the animals. And of course, we've only got to go to California, for example, to know that there are no cattle or milk cows outside. The poor beasts live in these vast and extremely unpleasant tin sheds. So you could say they're not going to have a problem with exhaust from the animals because the animals aren't going to be in the open air at all. I can understand if somebody's an animal rights person and interested in the suffering of animals. I say to you, you need to pay attention to what these people are really about and what the people at the World Economic Forum are really about.
Right. Well, I mean, Penny Mordaunt was speaking at Edinburgh. She wasn't at the World Economic Forum, but the journalist that was holding a burger. And you're talking about growing flesh. Well, they're starting off not by growing flesh, but what they have done is that they have genetically modified an enzyme which is in flesh, and they are applying it to vegetable matter to create the Impossible Burger. This is the latest hype that was at Davos. It was being presented at Davos and people were being given the opportunity to taste it. So they've genetically modified an enzyme that's in flesh, the enzyme that gives it its flavor, gives it its smell, and gives it its bloodiness. And they've put it into these new burgers and are encouraging people. They're at the moment only available through specialist outlets, specialist restaurants and so on, but this is certainly the direction we're moving in.
Well, wonderful. Well, I'm going to say I probably in my life have only ever eaten 3 McDonald's burgers, and I don't want to increase that number. I don't think I'm going to be eating one of those burgers. But what's the choice? Well, I was a little bit shocked when this was pushed through the letterbox of my home. It was an advert for Domino's pizza. I looked at the photograph and I thought, I've never actually seen such miserable women before. Is this the result that they've just eaten a Domino's pizza? I don't know. But I found this really offensive advertising, so much so that I decided to just do a little bit more work on it. What was it? I didn't know the significance of these 3 extremely depressed women, but apparently that's a still from a video that Domino's has been putting out over national TV. I don't know whether women become more cheerful after they've eaten a Domino's pizza, but certainly when that advert came through my door, I thought, well, I'm not going to touch one. In fact, I never have touched one. So the other bit that caught my eye was the language, the official food of ordering by phone, but realizing the best deals are online. I don't know whether this is real English, Mike, but I looked at the grammar. I thought there's something particularly strange about this. The official food of ordering by phone is on the next line, so the ordering sticks out there. Is this the official food of the New World Order?
I don't know.
I'm being a little bit cheeky there, but I'll let people think about that. So I went to have a look at the Domino's site to see what Domino pizzas were about. They've got vision, purpose and values, our markets, our journey. And the vision is simple. We want to be the #1 pizza company in the world and in every neighborhood. And I found that a very scary vision, that this firm thinks that every neighborhood across the world would be better if it had a Domino's pizza outlet there.
Good.
I find that really worrying. And a linguistic expert pointed out that the domino bit is very interesting, because if you look at its origins, you can have Latin, Lord, Master, but you're looking at masks and veils and the gowns that priests wear. So I don't know whether these things link up. I'm having a little bit of black humor here, but there was the advert delivered to me, which suggested to me, it's only my personal opinion, that if you eat a Domino's pizza, you're going to get depressed. I may be wrong. But they've got some great ideas, because they've got their own leadership guru working with them. Go and have a look at Bright Ideas Trust, and you can see the gentleman embedded in the picture. And I hope I can read some of this, but this is, sorry, let's come back to this. Let's see what this man has to say. Bear with me, I need glasses these days. There was a question. Our research suggests that young people have a more jaundiced view of leadership in schools. Why do you think that is? We're living in an age where there's a lack of trust in leaders. Interesting theme, Mike.
Yes.
Lack of trust in leaders, especially in areas like banking and politics. Many young people look at the people in positions of power and they don't see good role models. So it may be that the research is simply reflecting this model of leadership. We need to try to redefine what great leadership looks like for young people and get that trust back. It's our job to empower young people to see what good leadership can be.
Sorry, this is a pizza company, Brian.
This is a pizza company, but look at the language and what they're talking about. Young people don't trust people in banking and politics. So what's the solution? The solution is to redefine leadership so that young people start trusting bankers and politicians.
Don't fix the problems that cause the distrust. No, you just redefine.
Reframe the young people. Yeah. So I'm going to say, if you're interested in pizzas, and particularly if you're interested in Domino's, perhaps you might actually like to go onto the Domino's website yourself. Spend as much time there as you like. Don't get too depressed, though.
Okay. Look, the other thing that is major part of the government agenda for quite some time is the greatest privatisation the world has ever seen. This is something that was announced in the budget quite a number of years ago. But the National Audit Office has now got a report out today on the Ministry of Defence's sale of property to a private company and then lease it back. This is accommodation for military and other staff that are working. This is
asset stripping. This is NHS on reheat, basically, to use that expression.
Absolutely. So what they're saying is that the Ministry of Defence committed itself to an annual rental bills of £200 million, that it lost out on billions of pounds of asset value as a result of selling and leasing back the majority of its married quarters estate to Annington Property Limited. Because of subsequent steep rise in housing prices and rents. So they're suggesting that depending on how you value the properties, that the Ministry of Defence has thrown away somewhere between 2.2 and 4.2 billion pounds of asset value. This is tantamount to what Gordon Brown did with the gold, if you remember it, when he sold the gold at the lowest price that he could. So basically, the Ministry of Defence had sold 55,000 homes that it owned in return for an upfront £1.66 billion cash sum, and then it rented them back on a 200-year under lease from Annington. And unfortunately, the terms of the lease seem to mean that they have to do some upkeep on this property. So they're leasing this back from this company. What does the company have to do for the money? Apparently nothing, because the Ministry of Defence has to maintain the properties. And unfortunately, they haven't been maintaining the properties properly. And as a result, it has cost £11,369 per house to bring properties up to the standard required for handing back the properties to Annington when we choose to do that.
I think this is known as corruption, Mike.
That
believe
was exactly
this is
what I thought.
Criminal corruption by our own government. And by MPs and the civil servants, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. So slightly related to this then is the whole issue of procurement and defence procurement. And so I want to introduce you to Elżbieta Bieńkowska, who's the European Commissioner for the Internal Market. And she and the European Commission have decided that they are going to begin infringement procedures against 5 European member states for not following the Commission's rules on defence procurement. So what they're saying is that since the beginning of its mandate, the Juncker Commission is acting to build a strong Europe that can defend and protect its citizens at home and abroad, an ambition which cannot be achieved without pooling defence spending and strengthening the conditions for an open and competitive defence market in Europe. Against this background, and as announced in the European Defence Action Plan, the Commission is ensuring the effective application of defence procurement rules to help companies operate across borders and help member states get best value for money. So what does this mean? It means that they have decided to send letters of formal notice to Denmark, Italy, the Netherlands, Poland and Portugal for not applying or not doing so correctly the EU rules on public procurement in defence and security markets. So what this means for Italy, Poland and Portugal is they've been accused of awarding a number of defence contracts to national suppliers in breach of the Defence Procurement Directive, because according to the directive, contracting authorities are obliged to, except in very narrowly defined exceptions, they are obliged to award contracts by applying one of the procurement procedures and make sure that companies in other countries get the chance to bid and win those contracts.
Yeah.
And in the case of Denmark and the Netherlands, the Commission is concerned that these 2 countries have imposed unjustified offset requirements demanding compensation from non-national suppliers. So what are they saying? Basically, it's incumbent upon national governments to make sure that national or local companies don't get the business. What does that mean? Is this efficient?
Well, it's not designed to be efficient. This is designed to help European military unification, in that the procurement system must be pan-Europe as opposed to by a nation state.
Absolutely. So Elżbieta there said ensuring that public expenditure on defence is spent efficiently is in everyone's interest. The Defence Procurement Directive can help ensure the taxpayer money is spent well. Well, I just want to highlight this article by Martin Edwards on the website. International public procurement rules lay bare the lies of Brexit. The final paragraph says, following the EU referendum vote, it's difficult to see how these international public procurement rules could be ignored by future British parliaments wishing to develop bi-national public procurement policy and promising to provide British jobs for British workers. International public procurement rules lay bare the lies of Brexit, and it's clear that the greatest threat to the United Kingdom regaining its place as a fully independent sovereign nation is the ongoing rise of global governance, because the point we're making in that article, of course, is that the European Union is applying, through its directives, international policy which is coming through at the United Nations level. So do have a read of that article for more.
Which is very important, because if we lose control of our military, we of course no longer exist as a nation state. Well, wonderful photograph. I'll bring the article in a second, but here he is, possibly the man to be the next Prime Minister, Gavin Williamson, the man who kept a tarantula, I think, on his desk, frightening his staff in Whitehall or Westminster, wherever it was. We did have a UK column reporter present for this little gathering, so we can actually put in what he was saying to the military personnel around him. He was saying, don't forget, chaps, those nasty Russians are coming. Government policy is run, hide, tell. So I think this is roughly where the army is being pushed, because if they haven't got any guns or equipment, that's probably not a bad thing to do. Here's the rest of the article. That £1.3 billion bill for recruiting, which had completely failed. And of course, this is Capita, so this is another private company simply milking taxpayers' money. This is fraud, it's corruption, it's criminal, what is happening here. And of course, not being fully reported in the press. If that's not bad enough, we better bring in Big Lizzie, the aircraft carrier, because apparently there's been a problem that the sprinkler, fire suppression sprinkler system in the hangar had misfired and gone off. So basically a lot of things got wet pretty quickly. I'm going to say it doesn't take much for a fire system to go off, but this was the real part of the story where they were saying that basically, of course, it was only a while ago that there'd been a leak, and we said quite correctly that was what was known as a stern gland. So it was interesting here to see the Daily Mail's explanation because they say water is getting through a propeller, a rubber seal around the propeller shaft, and you can see the arrow going just behind that very big propeller. I have to say, Mike, I think that this is probably complete and utter nonsense, because if water's getting into the ship, I think it's coming through the orifice where the propeller shaft goes into the hull of the ship. So I'm going to say very gently here, is this Daily Mail fake news? I have a suspicion it is. What's going on with our journalists? I don't know. I should just smile wryly.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to say thank you very much. We've had a guest in our studio today to see what we do and how we do it. So we'll say thank you very much to that gentleman for coming. I'm also going to say to overseas viewers, particularly in the United States, if you are picking up similarities between what we are describing happening in UK and what you are seeing happening in the United States, and you would like to send us material emphasizing the similarities in the political agenda, then we'd love to receive this, because of course the policy coming in isn't UK policy, this is world governance policy that's now starting to destroy Britain as a nation state as much as it's attacking the United States or other countries. So if you think you've got good evidence-based material showing what's happening in your country, it could be France, could be Germany, the Netherlands, please get in touch with us. That's it for today. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.